The tree-lined streets of the Maple Ridge district in suburban Arlington, Virginia were bathed in the gentle afternoon light of the May sun. Caroline Foster sat in the driver's seat, guiding her Volvo into the stone-paved driveway of her home. She checked her appearance in the mirror and smoothed her slightly disheveled chestnut hair. Having finished a long day's work on the eve of her birthday, a small sense of accomplishment showed on her face. Caroline was respected in the area as the manager of Forever Elegant, a high-end jewelry shop. The gems she selected always seemed to shine brighter, and her advice earned tremendous trust from wealthy customers. "I'm home," she called out. As she opened the front door, the sunset light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the white walls of the living room in a soft orange glow. The spacious living room reflected the aesthetic sense of her husband Brian, an architect, in every corner. The minimalist yet warm design was particularly her favorite among his works. "Welcome home, Caro," Brian's voice called from the kitchen, followed by his appearance. Her husband, standing over 6 feet tall with closely cropped black hair and an ever-gentle gaze, was wearing a white apron. Even after 12 years since they met and 10 years of marriage, Caroline still found herself moved by his presence. "Something smells wonderful," she said. "It's your birthday eve dinner," Brian smiled. "We'll celebrate at the restaurant I booked tomorrow, but tonight I wanted it to be just the two of us." Caroline approached her husband and gave him a light kiss. Their life was stable and fulfilling, a beautiful home in an upscale neighborhood, a relationship built on mutual respect, and careers they were both passionate about. If there was one wish that hadn't been granted, it was having a child. Despite several attempts, doctors had told them it might take time. Still, they hadn't given up hope and lived each day with gratitude for their current life. "Oh, by the way," Brian said, "Vanessa called. She's coming tomorrow night for your birthday." Caroline frowned. "My sister. That's unusual." While Vanessa and Caroline looked alike, their personalities and lifestyles were polar opposites. Where Caroline was steady and goal-oriented, Vanessa was impulsive and jumped from job to job. She had recently mentioned starting work at a high-end boutique called Le Charme, but no one knew how long that would last. "How is she doing lately?" Caroline asked with a slight shrug. "She seemed fine," Brian answered while chopping vegetables. "She said she's prepared a special present for you." "Well." Caroline's expression showed surprise. "That's unusual. Vanessa giving presents." The sisters' relationship was complicated. From childhood, there had been a subtle sense of competition between them. Their parents had loved them equally, but Vanessa always seemed to feel she lived in Caroline's shadow. While Caroline graduated college, secured a stable job, and married a wonderful man, Vanessa's life remained unsettled. Though they maintained the appearance of close sisters, Caroline didn't miss the occasional glint of envy in Vanessa's eyes. "Maybe she wants to celebrate in her own way," Brian said, pouring Cabernet Sauvignon into wine glasses. "It means she's growing up." Caroline loved Brian's optimism. He always tried to see the good in people, which had a positive influence on her as well. However, she knew that Vanessa wasn't simply coming to celebrate her birthday. "I suppose," she said. "I'm curious to see what kind of present she'll bring tomorrow." Despite her words, a small worry sprouted in Caroline's heart. She pushed it aside and picked up her glass. "Let's enjoy a wonderful evening tonight." Brian responded with a smile. "Of course. Let's make it a special night just for you." Outside the window, the gentle Virginia twilight deepened, enveloping them both. Caroline wished this peaceful life would continue tomorrow and forever after. On Caroline's birthday night, she was relaxing with Brian in the living room. Outside, rain had begun to fall, creating a pleasant background sound as it tapped.
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit Stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
Against the windows. They had enjoyed lunch at the French restaurant, Lucille, that they had reserved, and were now spending a peaceful evening at home. The doorbell rang, and Caroline checked the clock. 7:30. "It's Vanessa," she said as she stood up. As usual, she can't be on time. When she opened the door, there stood Vanessa dressed in an elaborate dress. Her hair was cut in the recently fashionable short bob style, and her makeup was perfect. She had a flashiness that was the complete opposite of Caroline. "Happy birthday!" Vanessa exclaimed, giving Caroline an exaggerated hug. She smelled of expensive perfume. "Did you have a lovely day?" "Yes, very much," Caroline answered with a smile. "Thank you for coming." Vanessa entered the living room and gave Brian a special smile. "Hey, Brian. Handsome as ever." "Good evening, Vanessa," Brian responded politely. His expression was calm, but Caroline sensed a slight tension in the air. "Now, it's present time." Vanessa pulled out a small blue velvet box. "I picked something special." Caroline took the box and opened it. Inside gleamed a beautiful platinum bracelet. It featured delicate craftsmanship with small sapphires and diamonds arranged throughout. It was clearly an expensive item. "Vanessa, this is..." Caroline was at a loss for words. "It's beautiful, but such an expensive gift." "It's a custom piece," Vanessa smiled. There was something unfathomable in that smile. "Be sure to wear it." Brian peeked into the box and momentarily showed a hard expression. However, he quickly composed himself and said, "It's a lovely gift, Vanessa." "Thank you," Caroline said while expressing her gratitude, but couldn't hide her confusion at her sister's sudden generosity. Vanessa had never given such an expensive present before. "Try it on," Vanessa urged. Caroline wrapped the bracelet around her wrist. It was a perfect fit. The jewels caught the light and beautifully complemented her pale skin. "It suits you," Vanessa said. "I knew it would be perfect for you." That night, Vanessa didn't stay long, leaving after a glass of champagne. After she left, Caroline stared at the bracelet and asked Brian, "What do you think? Such an expensive present out of the blue." "Maybe it's her way of making peace," Brian chose his words carefully. "Or maybe her job is going well lately." Caroline nodded, but felt something off. For that night, however, she set aside her doubts and decided to simply appreciate the beautiful gift. The next day, Caroline went to work wearing the new bracelet. All the employees at Forever Elegant exclaimed in admiration at its beauty. "My, Caroline," her colleague Diana Clark approached. She was a woman knowledgeable about jewelry. "That's a beautiful bracelet." "Is it new?" "No, it's a birthday present from my sister." Caroline extended her wrist. "What do you think?" Diana looked at the bracelet with interest. "Exquisite craftsmanship. This design is trendy lately, but something this refined is rare. Your sister must be quite generous." "Yes," Caroline smiled. "I was surprised too." That afternoon, as Caroline was making her rounds in the store, Diana approached her again. "That bracelet is more impressive the more I look at it," she said. "If you don't mind, could you ask where it was purchased? I wonder if it's from a brand our store could carry." "I'll ask Vanessa," Caroline replied. Over the next week, a small change occurred in Caroline's life. Vanessa's visits increased. Her sister, who previously visited only once every few months, now came to her house twice a week. "I just want to share my news," Vanessa said cheerfully. "Things are going well at the boutique. My boss has recognized my talent and is letting me handle special clients." Caroline congratulated Vanessa on her success. However, she casually noticed her sister's special smiles for Brian and attempts to speak with him alone, though she tried not to mind. Brian remained professional and polite, but Caroline didn't miss how uncomfortable he sometimes seemed. One evening, as Caroline was fixing the clasp on her bracelet, Brian was watching her from behind. You wear that bracelet all the time, he said. Yes, I like it, Caroline answered. Is there a problem? No, just. Brian hesitated. I was just wondering since Vanessa's been coming around a lot lately. Caroline looked directly into her husband's eyes. Is there something you want to tell me? No, nothing, he said quickly. She's your sister, and I think it's good that you're getting closer. Caroline didn't pursue it further, but the conversation planted a small seed of doubt in her mind. A few weeks later, there was a concerning news report. A series of high-end jewelry thefts had been occurring in Northern Virginia. Caroline's shop received a notice from the police with instructions to strengthen security. Recent incidents have been very sophisticated, the police officer explained during a staff meeting. We believe the stolen items aren't being sold domestically but are likely being moved overseas. While listening to this, Caroline thought it had nothing to do with her. Her store had strict security and had never experienced any problems. However, she unconsciously touched the bracelet on her wrist. One night, Caroline had gone to bed early, exhausted from work. When she was half asleep, she heard Brian's voice from downstairs. He was talking to someone on the phone. I need a little more time, his voice was quiet but serious. I know, but I can't tell her yet. Caroline became fully awake. Who was her husband talking to? And what couldn't he tell her? For a moment, Vanessa's face flashed in her mind, but she quickly dismissed the thought. She trusted Brian. He was an honest person. It must be business talk or something. Yet that night, she couldn't sleep for a long time. On a weekend afternoon, Caroline was enjoying shopping at the large Willow Creek Plaza mall in suburban Arlington. Trying to forget her recent anxieties, she had come to look at dresses as a treat to herself. She wore a refreshing blue dress and the bracelet Vanessa had given her for her birthday. The bracelet gleamed beautifully in the soft afternoon sunlight. After visiting 3 stores, Caroline decided to take a coffee break at the food court. As she sat at a table checking her smartphone, a voice called from behind her. Excuse me, do you have a moment? When she turned around, there stood a man in a navy jacket and black pants. He appeared to be in his mid-40s, with intelligent features and sharp eyes. At first glance, he looked like a businessman, but there was something authoritative about his demeanor. Yes. Caroline answered, a little confused. The man produced an identification card. Detective James Connor. I'm with the Virginia State Police Theft Special Investigation Unit. A small alarm went off inside Caroline. Is there something I can help you with? Detective Connor directed his gaze to Caroline's right wrist. Where did you get that bracelet? The question was unexpected. This? Caroline lightly raised her wrist. And suddenly, she felt something catch in the depths of her heart. Her sister's gift, her sudden closeness, Brian's unnatural behavior, and the series of jewelry thefts in the area, these all connected in an instant, suggesting a terrifying possibility. Caroline froze, the blood draining from her face. Ma'am? Are you all right? Detective Connor asked. Oh, yes. Caroline came back to herself. This was a birthday gift from my sister last month. I see, the detective said calmly. Pardon me, but may I see your identification? And would you allow me to take a photo of that bracelet? Caroline pulled out her driver's license from her wallet with shaking hands. Is there a problem? Detective Connor noted the information from the license and took several photos of the bracelet with a digital camera. He was particularly meticulous about photographing the clasp area. This bracelet closely resembles one that was stolen from a high-end jewelry shop called Diamant Rouge in New York last month, he quietly informed her. Caroline's heart nearly stopped. Stolen. There must be some mistake. This is a birthday present from my sister. We're investigating that possibility as well, the detective said. Could you provide your sister's contact information? And would you mind coming to the police station to discuss this further? Noticing curious glances from nearby tables, Caroline felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment and fear. Of course. I'll cooperate, she answered in a small voice. The police station was about a 15-minute drive from the shopping mall. Caroline parked her car in the station's parking lot and entered the building under Detective Connor's guidance. Her head was in confusion. This must be some mistake. Vanessa couldn't have given her stolen goods as a present. Or could she? In a small interview room inside the station, Detective Connor began a more detailed explanation. This bracelet is part of a series called Eternal Crescent. Only 12 pieces were made worldwide, each with a unique manufacturing number engraved on it. He showed her a tablet. On it was a photo of a bracelet identical to Caroline's. This was stolen during a theft in New York on the 19th of last month. Its estimated value is over $100,000. Caroline was shocked into silence. $100,000. Vanessa couldn't possibly afford something like that. I didn't know anything, she said in a trembling voice. I truly thought it was a gift from my sister. Ms. Foster, Detective Connor's tone softened slightly. I believe you yourself aren't involved in this, but we need to investigate how this bracelet came into your sister's possession. It's likely part of a series of crimes committed by a wanted theft ring. Theft ring? Caroline felt dizzy. My Vanessa, that's impossible. Shall we try contacting your sister? The detective suggested. Caroline took out her smartphone and called Vanessa's number. The ringtone sounded multiple times, but there was no answer. She wanted to leave a voicemail message but couldn't find the words. She's not answering, Detective Connor observed. Should we contact your husband? Caroline called Brian. He answered on the third ring. Caro? What's wrong? Brian. Her voice was shaking. I'm at the police station. About the bracelet Vanessa gave me, it might be stolen. There was a moment of silence on the other end. What? Brian's voice was filled with surprise. I'll come right away. Which police station? Detective Connor continued his explanation while operating his tablet. Thefts of this series have been occurring along the East Coast for the past 6 months. The methods are very sophisticated, using advanced techniques like hacking security systems. 30 minutes later, Brian arrived at the police station. He was clearly distressed. This must be some mistake, he said to Detective Connor. My wife is innocent. She's a jewelry shop manager. If she knew it was stolen, she would never wear it. I believe you're right, Detective Connor replied calmly. However, this bracelet is definitely stolen property. At this stage, due to insufficient evidence, we won't be detaining Mrs. Foster, but I'd like both of you to remain in town until the investigation is complete. The bracelet was confiscated as evidence, and Caroline and Brian were allowed to return home in a form of provisional release. In the car, Caroline covered her face with trembling hands. This is a nightmare, she said, crying. Why would Vanessa? Brian put one arm around her shoulders. We don't know yet. We should give her a chance to explain. However, Caroline was beginning to have the terrible suspicion that her sister had used her. Why wasn't Vanessa responding to communications? And Brian's late-night phone call, was that related? On the way home, Caroline called Vanessa multiple times, but all were forwarded to voicemail. In her anxiety and confusion, she began to fear what would become of her life from now on. The next morning, Caroline awoke with dark shadows under her eyes. All night, she had alternated between fragments of sleep and anxious thoughts. Brian was already up, making coffee in the kitchen. Did you sleep at all? He asked gently. Caroline shook her head. Still no word from Vanessa. None, Brian said. I tried calling several times too, but there's no response. Caroline took a sip of coffee and steeled her resolve. I'm going to her apartment. I'll come with you, Brian suggested. They headed to Vanessa's apartment, which was in a converted old building a little away from the center of Arlington. Standing in front of Unit 302 with its vivid red door, Caroline rang the doorbell. There was no answer. She knocked several times, but still no response. Vanessa? Are you there? Caroline called out loudly. At that moment, the neighboring door opened, and an elderly woman poked her head out. If you're looking for her, she doesn't live here anymore, she said. What? Caroline was surprised. Since when? About 3 days ago. She packed up and left. No moving company came, so I guess she didn't have much to take. The woman continued, she wasn't one to socialize much, but she was in quite a hurry that day. There was a man with her too. What kind of man? Brian asked. Tall, with a foreign accent. Handsome. European, I think. Caroline and Brian exchanged glances. Vanessa had hurriedly left with a man. And this happened just days before the bracelet was discovered to be stolen. This couldn't be a coincidence. Back in the car, Caroline said in a trembling voice, she knew. She knew the police were starting to move. We still don't know, Brian tried to comfort her, but his voice lacked conviction. Upon returning home, Caroline immediately opened her laptop. I'm going to investigate myself, she said with determination. First, she checked Vanessa's social media. Though not usually very active, when carefully examining posts from the past few months, she made an interesting discovery. 6 months ago, Vanessa had posted photos of a trip to New York. There was a mention of someone with the initial R. Thank you for a wonderful weekend in New York. You make everything possible. Going further back, a name, Raymond, appeared several times. There were no photos, but from the comments, it was clear he was a foreigner. Caroline began searching this name on the internet. After combining various keywords, she discovered a shocking article. In an article headlined, Members of International Art and Jewelry Theft Ring Wanted in Multiple Countries, there was a name, Raymond Darnaud. A Frenchman, described as a member of an international criminal organization specializing in high-end jewelry theft. Brian! Caroline exclaimed. Look! Brian stood behind her, looking at the screen. The blood drained from his face. No way. He was at a loss for words. Vanessa, why would you do something like this? Tears welled up in Caroline's eyes. The next day, Caroline contacted Detective Connor and shared her findings. Though surprised, the detective promised immediate investigation. Good research, the detective said. This Raymond Darnaud is indeed on our list. Please let me know if you have more information about his relationship with your sister. That night, Caroline decided to organize Brian's study. For some reason, he had been absent lately, and she was driven by an impulse to find some clues. While tidying papers on the shelf, she found an old album tucked away in the back. Perhaps from Brian's college days. She casually flipped through the pages. And then she stopped at a shocking photograph. There were Vanessa and Brian, arms linked, laughing together. The date on the photo was before Caroline and Brian had met. Vanessa's smile was brighter than Caroline had ever seen, and Brian looked relaxed. Looking at the back of the photo, she saw a date and the words, "I'll never forget you." Caroline's legs gave way beneath her. She sat on the floor with the album in her hands. Brian and Vanessa had once dated. And she hadn't known. No, they had both deliberately not told her. Caro. Brian's voice came from the entrance. I'm home. Caroline couldn't speak. Brian came looking for her and entered the study. He stopped when he saw his wife sitting on the floor and the open album. I can explain, he said in a trembling voice. You and Vanessa were dating. Caroline said, tears flowing. Why did you keep quiet about it? Caro, listen, Brian knelt beside her. Yes, we dated briefly in college. But that was years before I met you. And it wasn't a real relationship. Liar. Caroline cried out. I'll never forget you. How is that not a real relationship? Brian exhaled deeply. I'll tell you everything. Vanessa and I did date. But she had problems. Impulsive, sometimes dangerous behavior. When I told her it was over, she couldn't accept it. And a few years later, I met you and learned what true love is. And after we got married, she still didn't give up. Caroline asked in disbelief. She would contact me occasionally, Brian admitted. But I always clearly refused her. And, last month, she suddenly called and said, I have something to tell Caroline, so give her this bracelet. I thought that it was. He stumbled over his words. You knew that bracelet was suspicious, Caroline's voice was cold. No, not exactly, Brian said. But I wondered how she could have gotten something so expensive. That's why I called that night. I was debating whether to consult the police. Caroline held her head in her hands. Everything was becoming intricately entangled. She decided to contact the police. I'm going to call Detective Connor, she said. I'm going to hand over all the evidence I've found. To find out where Vanessa is. Brian nodded silently. The next day, Caroline went to the police station with her laptop, the album, and all the information she had gathered. Detective Connor listened seriously to her story. This information is extremely valuable, he said. Especially the connection to Raymond Darno, which greatly advances our investigation. Caroline asked with a tired expression, can you find them? Definitely, the detective nodded. Actually, there's been movement since last night. We received information related to Darno and are tracking his movements. Your sister is likely with him. Caroline exhaled deeply. A week later, Caroline's phone rang. It was Detective Connor. Mrs. Foster, I have news. We've arrested Vanessa Morrison and Raymond Darno. Caroline collapsed into a chair. Where? At Miami Airport. They were trying to escape to Mexico. The information you provided was crucial. The next day, Caroline was scheduled to meet Vanessa at the police station. When she entered the meeting room, her sister was sitting there with an exhausted expression. There was no trace of her former glamour, just a lost young woman. Why? Caroline asked simply. That was her only question. Vanessa looked up. Her eyes held a mixture of remorse and hatred. Because you took everything, her voice was cold. Brian was originally mine, but you took him. You always get everything. I'm always second. Caroline was speechless. Something collapsed within her. Vanessa. I had no idea you felt that way. When I met Raymond, he gave me power, Vanessa continued. He recognized my value. And then, we came up with the bracelet idea. If I could implicate you in a crime, maybe Brian would leave you. That's what I thought. But that's criminal, Caroline said. What were you thinking? I have nothing more to say, Vanessa turned her face away. Just know this. I wasn't involved in Raymond's plan from the beginning. But he made me feel loved. You wouldn't understand. Police investigations revealed that Vanessa had been involved in multiple thefts as a member of the theft ring led by Raymond. Her role was mainly reconnaissance and information gathering, but she was also involved in disposing of stolen goods. Ultimately, Vanessa received a 5-year prison sentence for theft. Caroline and Brian's relationship was temporarily shaken, but through counseling, the two gradually mended their relationship. Can we start over? Caroline asked Brian one evening. We'll be fine, he took her hand. From now on, let's live more openly and honestly. 3 years later, Vanessa was released early as a model prisoner. After her release, she sent Caroline a long letter. "Sister, I'm not asking you to forgive what I did. But the time I spent in prison taught me many things. The importance of taking responsibility for my actions, and choosing my own life instead of blaming others. I hope one day we can talk again." Caroline didn't reply immediately. However, a few months later, she sent a brief response. "Forgiving and forgetting are different things. Our relationship may never be the same again. But we can each walk our own path in life." Caroline now runs a theft prevention awareness program at her jewelry shop, working with victim support organizations. Sometimes she still remembered that incident, but it didn't weaken her, it strengthened her. True family isn't just about being related by blood, but about people who wish for each other's happiness and support each other during difficult times. We all make mistakes. Maybe what matters is how we live afterward. She said this to a friend while gazing at the gentle spring sunlight outside the window. Life is unpredictable. But you can still move forward. And sometimes, after the darkest night comes the brightest morning.